How's it going, guys? It's Luminostic. Sorry if I'm a few minutes late, having some technical issues, which is kind of par for the course, I guess. And in this light stream, I want to talk about some really important stuff, super relevant. Basically, I'm going to try to teach the ancient Chinese martial art called Fok Wu, the ancient art of discernment that is nearly lost. And before you go accusing me of not being open-minded and picking on people's, ideas and beliefs, I assure you that I will establish beyond a reasonable doubt that a lot of the new age culture and the pop culture spiritual ideas are actually doing measurable damage to people's development, relationships. They set people up for ego inflation in a lot of cases. And the ultimate consequence of this oftentimes is actually dangerous. So do me a favor and make sure you watch this light stream all the way through, because my mind works kind of like a Grateful Dead jam. We'll start out on the, wide arm of the spiral, and eventually everything will connect as the spiral sort of collapses on itself. We're following the Fibonacci curve in this live stream. And so I promise if you stick with it, it'll be worth it. But I do generally tend to throw a bunch of sort of, wide stuff, a wide spectrum of stuff and condense it and bring it all together in the end. So, and also hit the like button, please. Share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join our secret streams, where you can learn a lot about Fok Wu, the ancient art of discernment. And it's super important stuff. I went through something with a friend this week that's going to be largely the basis for this light stream. It was really an unfortunate kind of situation. But I just am not really the kind of person to keep my mouth shut sometimes, especially when I think people might be in danger. And so, we have a big problem with materialism in the world, and that basically resulted in people, riding the pendulum swing away from the patriarchal sky god mythologies as far as they possibly could, which absolutely makes sense. We don't want to be trapped in that restrictive, repressive, suppressive kind of mentality. It's obviously not the truth. Far more harm than good has come from the old religions. The measurable damage in terms of the death toll of Christianity over time is more than all of the dictators in human history combined, and all the natural disasters. Science set back 200 years. And I mean, you guys know all the repression of personal expression and all of this stuff. And the only redeeming quality is people say, well, there's good moral substance there. Well, my son, I didn't have to teach him to be loving. People are born that way unless it's ruined in them by and large, So, it makes sense that people would try to escape from the shadow of history. Superstition. Superstition is not spirituality. Superstition is actually something that, as a former Mason, I'm no longer a member in good standing, but I still basically consider myself a Mason because I think in those terms spiritually, or you could think in terms of scientific illuminism. Superstition is one of the great evils. Blind faith and superstition are calamities for humanity. They're absolute travesties either way. You don't want to believe the things that are written in old books just because they're there. And you don't want to believe in silly superstitions and find yourself in a heap of trouble, which is what often happens. And so one of the things that I'm going to draw on to sort of elucidate how it is that, the pendulum has swung back, right? We went too far in the direction of abject materialism, and that is empty and vapid. Capitalism, the pursuit of material goods and wealth with no other purpose inherent in it, is not fulfilling. The crisis of purpose has driven people to suicide and school shootings, and people are just lost, and it's just a pointless nihilistic game. So who cares? And so the pendulum swings back in the other direction. And the problem with this is that, it's the conservation of momentum. When the pendulum has swung too far in one direction, it'll swing back too far in the other direction. And so now what we have is this sort of pop culture spirituality that's very much influenced by the New Age movement. And what I feel like I see is that once people open their minds to there being something more in the universe than just, blind matter and dead determinism, they just believe everything that's available out there. And that's unfortunately what happened with this friend of mine. It all started, we're going to go through these incidents piece by piece in order to, elucidate these things. The first incident involved this statue that he had purchased online that he showed up at my house talking about how it had great power. And, it was like $200 on Amazon or something. And I didn't say anything, because who knows? I don't see any reason why inert objects should have power. If something has power, you can put it into some kind of context and you can see what it does, right? So if something just does nothing and you're just saying, well, this has power, but it doesn't do anything, it just, if it does something, it may be psychological. And that's one reason why I don't really feel that I needed to say, you sure you really believe this, porcelain trinket that you ordered online is really this ancient, powerful Incan, power piece? Like, it doesn't really seem realistic, But like I said, in the interest of being open-minded and also because I do understand that the mind has tremendous power, no reason to interfere in that. I don't really see any reality in it, but but then there was an experience that I had with this person repeatedly where he would shift out of his normal, friendly, happy-go-lucky personality, and he would become really dark and kind of sinister and provoking paranoia. And then if you confronted him about it, he would just act like nothing happened and like look like, what are you talking about? Of course not, and turn back into his normal self. And this eventually caused, a big problem. It happened the first time that we drank San Pedro together, and then it happened another time when we took LSD. And so a few months after this incident, he apparently met with this apparent psychic who did a past life regression for him. That is another thing that, in my opinion, is complete nonsense. Even if someone can do a past life regression for you, if you were a member of a legitimate mystery school like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or the OTO or Freemasonry or something like that, paying someone or charging someone for spiritual knowledge is an absolute no-no. You cannot do that under any circumstances. You would immediately get ejected from the fraternity for something like this. First of all, because it's not real and you're scamming people, but there's a reason, an actual functional reason. When you're dealing with legitimate spirituality, there are rules, but they're not rules that are imposed in the way that they are in religious systems where, you just have this weird shit that you do that is just neurotic. It's just strange rituals with no point or purpose in them at all. If it's legitimate spirituality, there is some kind of reason, there is wisdom guiding every single decision that you make, right? There are methods of interpretation too, and we're going to get into that, how you can actually correlate, because, we can look at a system like alchemy, and this is why it's so valuable. Alchemy shows you that the physical is a reflection of the spiritual, or vice versa, chicken or the egg, which one came first. But, since you have a way of actually demonstrating that, you can extrapolate things from that, and you can have faith in the idea that there are correspondences, that you can read all of these allegories in the universe and actually arrive at truth in this way, rather than having to have faith or, superstition or adopting a doctrine from someone. The universe becomes your living teacher. But I digressed a little bit from the fact that, it's not even ethical to do things like past life regressions, because in real life, if you are able to access knowledge like that, you have to do it yourself. And the reason you have to do it yourself is that the process of evolving of first, addressing your traumas, integrating your shadow, learning about different metaphysical systems from all around the world, practicing shamanism to whatever extent is appropriate, depending on your skill level. This is why initiations and guidance in fraternities and that sort of thing is actually so valuable. And it's, a lot of what we're experiencing in terms of the Woo-icide that's occurring is because people don't have respect for these systems. People have kind of just come to the conclusion it's just a bunch of people making stuff up anyways. So you might as well just believe whatever you want. And you know what I mean? What I'm saying is that it's not like that. There are actually, techniques that you can use to arrive at actual, observable, demonstrable truth, even of spiritual concepts and ideas. It's not a crapshoot and a blind crapshoot in the dark. It just isn't. So, part of the reason is that you're taking away the potential for that person to go through these processes themselves. And if they have not the ability to attain the knowledge on their own, they have no business having the knowledge. The universe will give it to them when it is time through their own processes and through their own devices. This idea of, accessing spiritual knowledge through your own artifice and according to your own ingenium, is absolutely essential, because we are trying to, for one thing, to move away from the hierarchical systems of the past. People tend to regard those that they believe are psychic or, connected to alien intelligences as like special, and, they get worshipped, and people, like those preachers that they have a $40 million mansion already and 3 jets, and then they get their sheep to donate money so they can buy a 4th jet. Like, this seriously just happened with one of these Christian preachers. You know what I mean? We put these people on a pedestal. We assume that they have a talent, and that talent and that information is not available to us. But it's not true. You have to work for it, and you have to overcome intellectual laziness. You have to have, the critical thinking, and the ability to reason, and the objectivity to not get attached to the wrong ideas. You need to learn, when you experience something that could suggest a past life, how to instantly look for every other possible explanation before you decide on something. And even when you decide on something, you're always probably going to know that it's not necessarily the truth, right? So you have to have this huge skill set before you can get into this territory comfortably. And now here's why, all right? Because what happened with this person? He was told that he was a great shaman in the past, right? In a past life. So all of a sudden now he doesn't need to spend years working under other shamans and plant medicine. He doesn't need to study psychology. He doesn't need to learn psychoanalysis. This is a person that is not even really aware of his subconscious at all, has not even begun the process of individuation. But because he paid some fake psychic to tell him what he wanted to hear, right? Because that's what they do. By the way, I'm about to outline one of the most common New Age scams and how they set people up and how they get leverage so that you believe what they say. Because once you're invested in one idea that they sell to you, everything else that they say has clout, because now you want to believe in the first thing. So if you invalidate the other stuff they tell you later, then you have to run the risk of overturning this original idea that you were so invested in, right? So usually, there'll be a short interview, or you can even size someone up if you have half a brain, tell them what they want to hear. This guy that went to this psychic, I'm interested in plant medicine. Okay, well, then you're the reincarnation of a shaman. That'll be $1,500. You know what I mean? Fucking brilliant, right? So, but then it gets worse, right? Because the next thing that fake shamans and fake psychics do the most common scam, is that once they have given you this bit of information that you're invested in and you want to believe, then they tell you that there's a spirit attached to you. You have a parasitical entity, and you need their help to remove it, right? And usually this is predicated by, you telling them, well, I have this issue, or I have this tendency, or, I have this depression. And so now, instead of going to seek plant medicine or going to seek therapy or, even learning to do psychoanalysis on yourself, you believe that this fake shaman or psychic has removed this entity from you, and now you don't get help. And you're just as screwed up as you were before, but you think you're better. So now you're 10 times worse, right? And it gets worse. Wait till you hear where this goes. And this is happening constantly to people. This is like what this process I'm describing is like the main catalyst for ego inflation, which, once someone is in the middle of ego inflation, it happened to me during part of my process. There's actually almost cliche way that it occurs in males, where you have almost the same exact thought patterns and stuff, like, almost always. You cannot tell this person anything once they get into that ego inflation thing, even though all their ideas might be totally demonstrably false, but they believe, I've connected with the Akashic record. And, now if I question these ideas that I have, then all of this like, paper tower that I've built will just crumble and fall over. So now they're invested in one, the foundation of the structure that they're building is faulty. So the whole thing is now built higher and higher and higher on a faulty structure. And eventually what happens is it falls over. The tower collapses, right? So give me a second to rewind here and get back plugged into the correct part of the story. So this idea of parasitical entities or negative spiritual attachments, right? So this person described this experience of shifting into another personality to this psychic woman, who then tells him, well, it's because you have the spirit attached to you. So this person is taking plant medicines and psychedelics and actually cannot recall the time where this other personality takes over, right? And I've seen it. It's not a spirit. It's him, 100%. I know him well. I've known him for years. It's him. There's no possibility that it's a spirit. It's not. It's him. It's exactly the dark sides of his personality, completely isolated and exaggerated, because he has had no integration of his subconscious. There's no communication. He has not gotten to the hemisync stage, or individuation, as Jung called it, where the conscious and subconscious mind, there's a bridge built and now there's communication happening. It's not there. And it's really extreme. And so how that manifests is the shifting. It's called fragmented personality disorder. You're shifting from, one aspect, the shadow entirely, or to your normal conscious self. And it's one or the other, but it's not a mixture of both, like, an integrated, individuated psyche is. And so now this belief that this spirit, okay, and he believes that he is a shaman because of his past lives, he's still doing plant medicine ceremonies for people. Now, I don't know about you, but if I went to a plant medicine ceremony and the guy said, hello, in the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell you that I sometimes shift into an alternate personality that I believe is a spirit possessing me when I take plant medicine. Have a seat on your mat. You know what I mean? So obviously I felt compelled to confront him finally. It was like, this is not real. And we have to talk about this because it could be dangerous, and of course, at this point in the ego inflation process, he just basically, he had offered to take me on an all expenses paid trip to Egypt. And my interest is in his mental health. And I knew that if I confronted him, that trip would disappear. Which is what happened, I think, but I had no choice. It's increasingly, more and more unhealthy. And so it still gets worse, though. Oftentimes what happens when people believe that they have pierced the veil and they are, experiencing this gigantic ego inflation, a really good way to understand it is that if you develop the soul or the psyche, or, you have connected with the animus mundi, however you want to think about it, there is substance that is filling that expansion, right? So if you have not gone through the proper processes, if you have not studied, the best schools of mysticism, and looked for, one of the most powerful things you can do is look for the correlations between disparate systems, for example, right? So if physics agrees with Taoism that the universe is an exactly perfectly balanced interplay of antinomies, or how did Maynard James Keenan from Tool, he wrote his autobiography and he called it a perfect union of contrary things, right? That's what the universe is. That's why we have duality, because it must be that way in order for it to exist. It's a perfect balance of light and darkness, hot and cold, all these opposites in perfect, exact balance, right? So when you are going through your process and trying to determine whether knowledge that you're intuiting is actually correct, you can use this kind of stuff as a correlation, right? And there are ways to see which systems have the greatest value because science is able to validate a lot of the stuff. For example, in alchemy, you are using mercury to make gold, right? And it's all in this book right here. The entire process that is now happening in laboratories is in this book described in detail. And by the way, if you become a patron, I'm going through this entire thing with my patrons, every single degree of Freemasonry up to 32nd. And we're going through it all in great detail, including alchemy. And they describe how you start with Mercury, which also, by the way, is the closest planet to the sun. And one of the elements, the most common elements that's produced in stars, is gold. That's why gold is a symbol of consciousness, because our consciousness comes from the light. You know what I mean? It's really crazy because there's no way that anyone could have done that deliberately. And so again, we have a clue from the universal mind that this system of alchemy has some kind of power, because now we know that Mercury is one proton away from being gold. So if the ancient alchemists didn't actually know how to make gold, why did they know that choosing Mercury, because it's the closest possible element to transmute into gold? But they also knew that you can't do impossible things. If you want a chicken, you must have chickens to make more chickens. And so you need a tiny bit of gold to put in with the mercury. And then through a process that involves electromagnetism, just an electric charge, basically they described knocking a proton off. They didn't have the language back then. And then you have gold. And it's also symbolic of the metaphysical growth and process of a spiritual aspirant. And it's said that you cannot actually succeed in this alchemy unless you understand both sides of it. The energetic and spiritual basis of it, and how that's reflected in, the physical manifestation. So that's just a great example of, when you see something like that and science has shown us that, yeah, they knew what they were talking about, then you go, okay, I will accept that alchemy has some kind of validity, right? But you're not just, believing a psychic that says she can do past life regressions just because she says so, or Bashar, who is totally fake, going out of his way to say, like, in this day of your time, like this alien is going to use this super awkward, clumsy language just to constantly remind people that he's an alien in case they forget or something. You know what I mean? There's like little things like that where it's like, come on, man, this is just such a joke. And all that guy does basically is recite the Kybalion. And because the Kybalion is actual truth, it is metaphysical substance of the highest order, people are like, wow, it's not a higher consciousness. It's just the Kybalion. That's all he's doing, is just reciting the Kybalion with commentary, If somebody is actually able to describe a star system, especially if there is not knowledge of that star system on this planet at the time, then you might take them seriously. I had one such experience where I was on ayahuasca and I realized some stuff, or it was told to me about Sirius C, I guess, and that information was confirmed a few weeks later. So I had no choice but to take that seriously, and there are other little things like that, where there's actually something there that you can't refute. There's evidence of it, but you're not believing anything in the universe based on faith. That's just a fatal mistake. And so we were talking about alchemy, the alchemical process. And so now the information that this person is getting from the Akashic record, he tells me all of a sudden I'm scanning the universe and I can get all this information, and it's all wrong. It's not opinion. It's not different ideas. That the first thing was that the universe is out of balance energetically. Well, if you have a thought like that and you believe that you're getting it from the Akashic record, the first thing to do is actually to compare it to the real world, because we know that you can learn And only through observation of physical phenomena, you can learn about the spiritual underlying fabric of it. By the way, you guys, if you haven't hit the like button, please do. Share, subscribe, and join our Patreon, where I go into much greater depth about all of this stuff than I do on these public streams. So basically, what, you have to be objective and be able to consider, like, okay, I have this bit of information. Is it really possible that in the 2 or 3 years that I've even been thinking about this stuff, which is the case with this person, and only seriously for a couple of months, is it really likely that I have figured out, I understand the universe already better than my friend Illuminostic, who's been doing this for 35 years. I've been thinking about it for a couple of months, and you're completely wrong about everything. I mean, it's possible, sure, but it just so happens that my opinion on that correlates with physics, with Taoism, with Buddhism, with, you know what I mean? When you find something that everyone that's ever looked at it agrees about, like the one place where mysticism and physics are 100% on the same page, and you've only been thinking about it for a couple of months, and you're going to absolutely refute everyone, chances are good you are experiencing ego inflation. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be able to remain objective and evaluate the things that you're saying and thinking, based on some kind of correlation in the world. Otherwise, you are just going to build this massive structure in your head that's based on a faulty premise. And it's not only a waste of time, but eventually you can get so lost down the rabbit hole that bad things actually happen. Like huge falling out with a good friend, for one thing, that has just, had to tell you, you're acting like a goddamn fool with this stuff. This is not how things work. You have to invest decades of development before you're going to be scrolling the Akashic record. That's a big problem with the New Age movement and all this related pop culture spirituality, is that people are engineering ideas and systems that you want to pay them for. You know what I mean? They're going to make it sound easy, they're going to make it sound fast, and they're going to make it sound effective. And it's almost always a complete exaggeration on all counts, because that's not how anything in the universe is. You have to be intellectually developed. You have to have the willpower and discipline to maintain skepticism and objectivity. You have to develop and train the mind to navigate the abyss. The way this is talked about in the Western mystery tradition is that, as a seeker, when you reach the place where the veil that separates the two hemispheres of your mind, and therefore the veil in the external world as well, is ready to break and give you a glimpse at the face of Isis, right? You're a dweller at the threshold. You're at the door, but you have not gone through. And then you actually take the step, and you have to cross the abyss. And crossing the abyss, you, the magician or the seeker, however you want to term it, loses all that they are and all that they have in this process, essentially and inevitably, because you have to go out into the universe and realize that you don't know anything. That everything that you believed and thought about the universe and spirituality, if you were religious, whatever, you have to go through the process of defragmentation of the old false structures. Everyone hears that everything is wrong, but nobody really believes it, I guess. It doesn't seem like it. And so, if you get out into the abyss and you're seduced by superstitions and wish demons, believing your intuition has powers that you actually haven't developed, and that this knowledge that you're receiving from the Akashic record and the universal mind is accurate when it's easily and demonstrably proven false, you are going to get torn to shreds by the demon Choronzon, and your fragmented ego is going to become part of the rubbish heap of the gods. That's how it's talked about in the mystery schools. And this process is the same for everyone. And then once you've crossed the abyss successfully, you're still likely going to have to go through a dark night of the soul and all of these other aspects of this process before you actually achieve individuation and you become really prepared to actually navigate the true secrets of power and the true secrets of the mysteries. Sorry, just catching up with the chat. Yeah, and then, there's a lot of other ideas that are really, really popular that if you just kind of think about them just a little bit, and this is why, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of advice that you probably don't need, but it might help you to hear. Not being intellectually lazy will really serve you, because there are so many popular ideas that are so damaging in this regard, that you can easily determine. Like, for example, a lot of people are saying that there are malevolent aliens here. The only whistleblower that I know of that has any kind of evidence of, that we should take him seriously is that Greer cat, and he is definitely off his rocker at this point, but I think fame did that to him. I think he probably did have a valid, he had some element of truth to what he's saying, right? And I was told many, many years ago, first in a vision, and then by Golden Light Eagle and a group of Native Americans, that ancient peoples had always had contact with the star tribes, and that, they're basically benevolent, or at least neutral. And here's the simple equation, you guys. For one thing, if there were malevolent entities here, we would be completely enslaved by them already. Like, we've seen the technology that these aliens have, or whatever they are. I mean, they're able to move in ways that we could not shoot them down. One of those UAPs that's coming out of the ocean could take out the entire United States Air Force in a split second. You're telling me they're malevolent? What's stopping them from destroying everything and taking? What does malevolent mean then? What is malevolent? So, according to Stephen Greer, there's no such thing as a malevolent alien race. And one of the reasons that I've always suggested for this is that we are only partially malevolent as human beings. We have almost destroyed ourselves with only having technology for 150 or 200 years. So your position is that these beings are so advanced that they can come here from other star systems. But in the time that it took them to develop their technology, they didn't destroy each other if they're evil. You know what I mean? And I guess you could make the argument, well, they're loyal to each other. But that's not how evil works. That's not how it works. And this is why, I think the most brilliant person to actually ever write about conspiracies was Robert Anton Wilson. And he said that his research showed him that they always end up double-crossing each other. So there are all these conspiracies, but they always end up failing, because the people are all sinister that are involved. So, humans can't make it 10 years in a conspiracy. And so you're saying these malevolent aliens have made it 50,000 years without destroying each other? Or, and who's fighting them? Do you see any like space battles happening going on? I mean, it just isn't rational. It doesn't make any sense to say that they're malevolent aliens. And then, you can look at other aspects of really popular conspiracy theories that, if you just educate yourself just a little bit, it's instantly obvious that they're stupid. And I'm not talking about flat Earth. That is, I see people even in this community sometimes saying, I don't know enough about physics to know whether it's true or not. But the reality is that you can see with your naked eye a million different ways. It's just so dumb that it's just incomprehensible that there is even a single child on this earth that believes it. But the adrenochrome conspiracy is also that stupid. The source of it is a book by Robert Hunter called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And adrenochrome is actually more like a stress hormone than a drug. The effect of it would be that you would panic, you would sweat, you would have heart palpitations, you would have nightmarish hallucinations. If you took enough of it, you might die. It absolutely would accelerate aging. So the fact that people say that the Illuminati or the elite take it to slow their aging down, even though we're watching Bill Clinton get old, we're watching them all age perfectly well, right? Adrenochrome would accelerate your aging, and it's horrible. No one would take it on purpose. No one would take it on purpose. It's completely stupid. And there's so little of it in adult adrenal gland that it would take like, a dump truck load full of babies to get a single dose. The whole human race would be gone already if they were really extracting adrenochrome from us and drinking it. It's so goddamn stupid if you actually take the time to research it yourself. Also, adrenochrome can be bought from China for like $1 a liter or something. It's incredibly inexpensive and easy to synthesize. So, it's this kind of stuff where I think, I don't know whether it's naivety or if people just want to feel like they're part of the group by believing all these things, feeling like they're on the inside, the inner circle of knowledge. But you have to have enough respect for yourself. You have to have enough dignity to, be objective. And I know that people, like, we try so hard to be inclusive and tolerant and open-minded. And those are all really great characteristics. But if you take it overboard, you will find yourself so open-minded that wind is whistling through your ears. And, we need good people. Like, I am at this point trying to start a movement or, hope that I can get some momentum going and it will, become part of a larger movement of people that are actually committed to doing this correctly, not being abject materialist, not that trip, but also not flaky new agers with wind whistling through their ears. You know what I mean? It can be done. Scientific illuminism is a name that has been applied to this. We place no reliance on virgin or pigeon. Our method is science. Our aim is religion. Or let's see, there's another saying like that is super good. By the way, I haven't read any of the books, but I have read some samples of the works of Mike Hockney and the Pythagorean Illuminati that basically claim to be the real Illuminati. And they probably are, because whether they have initiation from a lineage from Adam Weishaupt or not, it is the illuminated knowledge that is taught in the secret coves of the mysteries. So if you're looking for some good reading material, I appreciate that, poo-poo. If you guys want to help me blow the channel up, share it everywhere. Support us. Like, money is not... it's not somehow it's not like readily available. So, in order to have power in this world, because some of the rules are dictated to us, not by us, we needed to have influence, money. So, I'm demonetized and there are options to support in the channel. And we really appreciate it. So where was I at with this? Mike Hockney and the Pythagorean Illuminati. Oh yeah. Intellectual laziness, you must also be okay with not knowing, because, I've described this many, many times, how you can always come up with alternative explanations for anything you experience. And you should, if you want to actually achieve illumination, and understand the universe in a real substantial way. You just have to come to terms with the fact that what that actually means, paradoxically, is that that you don't know, to some extent, right? There are things that we kind of can know. There are foundations, some things that we take for granted that give us a place to start from, right? Like the idea that the physical and spiritual reflect each other, and the idea that we can access information in non-ordinary ways. For example, how did the alchemists know that mercury was the closest element to gold? And how did they figure out to apply electricity to turn it into gold? Because that's what we do in a laboratory now. You know what I mean? So we have things that are proven that give us a substantive basis for some kind of structure. So we're not starting from scratch, but you have to be very, very selective in ascertaining, what is legitimate, what serves you, and how to identify those things. And there are some really basic rules, like, universality is a good one. It is true that a lot of the things that are accepted as conventionally, spiritual conventional knowledge, I don't think are correct, but they're not universal. For example, that you should not eat meat in order to be more spiritual. Life feeds on life. The opposites literally create each other. So life creates death. It literally creates it. There's no way around it. There are slime molds that can do an engineering job better than humans with computers. So if your problem with eating animals is sentience, there are single-celled animals or single-celled funguses that have more in common with us genetically than a cow that we're eating, and are way more intelligent than that cow. So what is your basis for saying that you're less spiritual if you eat meat? Shouldn't you not eat that slime mold because it can engineer fucking subway systems? You know what I mean? It's just, that's the irony is that the people that believe that you have to not eat meat in order to become spiritual actually have not even begun their spiritual journey and don't know what the fuck they're talking about. That's the actual truth. That those people have not even begun the trip, or they would understand that life feeds on life, and that's just part of the process. That's what being illuminated means. Enlightened, it just means that you know what is and actually objectively understand the phenomena in the universe and how to relate to them. Because you're not avoiding destroying sentience by eating mushrooms. You're just not. Well, alchemy and chemistry are related, but I mean, and there's chemistry involved in alchemy, but alchemy happens on two planes. The alchemist is doing internal work and internal purification and internal development in order to turn the lead of everyday experience and the lead of false beliefs into the gold of higher consciousness. But what you're trying to do as an alchemist is establish a physical corollary for the inner work. So it's sort of like a thermometer, an external gauge of your development to start with the first matter, the prima materia, and go through this stage of the development of the gold. And what you'll notice is that the stages of the putrefaction, the blackening, and then it'll become very colorful, and this whole thing exactly reflects the process that humans that have taken initiation go through. So it's really an extraordinary thing once you really understand what is happening with alchemy, and also that at this point it is proven. Like I said, join my Patreon at the $10 tier, a $10 a month tier, and you'll see the last 3 or 4 streams that I did are on alchemy in depth, and it's obvious that they knew what they're talking about in light of the technological developments. Another one that is extraordinary is the work of Michael Levin right now. He is, I don't know what his actual PhD is, but he's basically the Einstein of the current time period. And I have always been told that I was an uneducated idiot for saying that I didn't feel that random mutations can explain evolution alone, and also that the standard biochemical explanation for morphology and morphogenetics and cell intelligence was not adequate. And people would always just tell me I was an idiot and didn't understand biology. And what it actually is that people just assume that the experts that are telling them things are correct, and they call you an idiot even though they don't know what they're talking about. That's what actually it turned out to be, because now this Michael Levin character has proven that there is an electromagnetic field, the morphological field that somebody else posited years ago. Everyone laughed at him. That actually informs the development of organism. In fact, you can use electromagnetic EMFs through certain channels, and you can alter the development of an organism, and those changes remain present in the progeny of the organism. So if you make a two-headed worm with manipulating this electrical field, all of its descendants will have 2 heads, and the genome remains unaltered. All right. So the idea of a universal mind that contains all of this information and exists in an electromagnetic field is now proven scientific fact. And this is exactly what, this old 150-year-old Masonic book here talks about that. The Kabbalion talks about that. The All is Mind. But the idea of this electromagnetic field that we interface with, that is the real source of our mind, and that, our brain is actually like a receiving antenna and a filter, right? Because there's so much sensory input that it has to be restricted, almost all of it, in order for us to function. And so psychedelics and meditation and different things bring that filter down or off to whatever extent. And so, this idea really implies a lot of stuff. For example, I've always said that spirits don't have their own objective existence. And what they are is the magnetite in our brain is what gives coherence to the electromagnetic field, right? So that, this information as it exists in the universe as a field of EMFs, it doesn't have a lot of coherence. It's just kind of all out there. That's why when we smoke DMT or drink ayahuasca, until you get more experience, oftentimes you get a lot of gibberish and just weird, insane stuff that doesn't make any sense. That's why. And it's not that intelligence that you're interacting with isn't real at all. It is real, but it's not real in the same way that the IRS is real. Is how Robert Anton Wilson put it, and I always really like that. But what happens is that, the electromagnetic field is basically interfacing with your consciousness, and the magnetite in your brain is giving it structure. And that's what those experiences of spirit are. And now, due to Michael Levin's work, that's what mystery school adepts have been saying for thousands of years. And now we have a strong evidential basis for it. Also because, and this isn't always true, so there's a little bit of variance, but generally, cognition or intelligence or consciousness, there's a correlation between the complexity of the physical structure that gives rise to it, and it's like level, So, there were some studies done a while back where they said that, the brain is actually building itself in 11 dimensions. I don't know how in the hell anyone observed that. It was a really complex research paper. But, it makes sense in light of this understanding that that's how, higher consciousness is generated. And that's the thing about this approach to spirituality. Everything in the universe can be understood in terms of necessity. All of the laws of nature are there because of necessity. The way that 33rd Degree Mason put it that I really liked is, and when he says his, he means God's, right? They are not just because they're his laws. They're his laws because they are just. And that's not just meaning fair. It basically means that the universe is predicated on the laws such as they are because it's the only way to do it and give rise to the universe. And so, when you're thinking like, okay, are there immaterial beings, running around here? But you understand how the electromagnetic field interacts with magnetite, and you realize that the reason there are physical beings is because that's what gives order to consciousness. So probably not. It's actually possible to think through this stuff and arrive at, conclusions about it that actually are consistent with experience. We are at that point in the evolution of our spirituality. And, back to my story about my friend, that's why it was so frustrating. He had so much potential to be, a powerful illuminist, an illuminatus, and actually navigate all of this stuff with his intellect intact. And all it took was, one fake New Age psychic to completely send him off the rails on the woo-choo train. As soon as you let this stuff in, you guys have to remember that, fairy tales are not just cute stories. It is part of the way that the collective mind resonates information back to us, right? So the idea that, for example, only religious people get possessed, right? Demonic possessions are 9 times as high in Italy than other places in the world. Why? Because everyone's Roman Catholic, everyone believes in it. If you do not believe in negative spiritual entities, you will not be affected by them. That proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're not real. And that's the thing. Like, you guys can say, well, I believe that they are, but you're arguing with facts at this point. You know what I mean? There's no chance of that. The fact that only people that believe in it are affected by it is proof that it's a subjective belief. Period. End of story. There's no conversation to be had about this at that point. And it also correlates with belief, how intense the possessions are. So when you have families, for example, that are like super, super, super fundamentalist Christian, they're the ones that rip their own eyeballs out, which a girl just did a few months ago. She ripped her own eyeballs out because she thought Jesus was telling her to. Only people that are religious do this stuff. You know? So that's knowledge, you know, and it's great. It means that that's one less thing that you have to worry about, you know, but for a lot of people, that is actually, difficult because it means there's one less thing they can blame their, behavior on. There's one less crutch available to them. You have to take responsibility for yourself now, because there's no parasitical entity that is draining your vril, you know? It's just not happening. Somebody's asking how Crowley is related to DMT. I don't think Aleister Crowley had any contact with DMT except that the mystery, he had mescaline. But the mystery schools pretty obviously used a combination of Syrian rue and acacia. We know that because acacia contains DMT, and still to this day, it's sprinkled on, leaves are sprinkled on the grave of Freemasons, high-ranking Freemasons when they die. And so, you know, a lot of people have suggested that ergot was the source of the Kykeon drink, the psychoactive drink that was drank at the Mysteries of Eleusis. And then there was Soma in the farther up north, those mysteries. But there was always some kind of psychoactive component in the mysteries. And the thing about Syrian rue and acacia is that it would be available in both Egypt and the Mediterranean. So in both places where the mysteries originated, the plants that are necessary are found. So the thing is, though, the drink and the knowledge that it confers is the highest level of initiation. And so it's super secret. So if Aleister Crowley did drink that, he would never have written anything about it or talked about it to anyone except hypothetically. So I don't think there is any relationship there. That's another, you know, while we're smashing the woo here, there's a lot of people teach breathing techniques that allow you to release DMT. Nope. It might release DMT, but there isn't enough DMT in your entire body at any given system or any given time. Even if you were to get it all into your brain, into the receptors somehow, it's not enough to cause a trip. So that's not real, by the way. Yeah. So, you know, and there are lots of other foundational aspects to this kind of thinking that, you know, really the most powerful thing you can do is find the correlations where science and mysticism dovetails. I think it was Carl Sagan that said that science and spirituality should not be mutually exclusive, and if they are, it's a disservice to both. And that's absolutely true. You know, if you have to abandon reason and good sense and critical thinking in order to believe something spiritually or to believe a conspiracy theory, then you are failing. You know, that is not a good choice. You will not have to do that. You will be able to find a reason. You will be able to find logic. You will be able to find, you know, truth is self-substantiating. It does not need justification, and it's not irrational. It is all purposeful. That is the point of the universe and all of its constituent elements. There's some point, there's some reason, there's some purpose for them. Yeah, and by the way, you guys, I'm okay, but I was going to talk a little bit about as above, so below. There's another example of verifiable, like mystical doctrine, metaphysical doctrine that has proven itself to be true. You know, that which is above is like that which is below, and it was rephrased Kabbalistically as Keter is in Malkut and Malkut is in Keter. Because Keter is light, Malkut is matter. Light comes from electromagnetic wave or photons, either way, energy, which is, the most fundamental form of matter, but it is a physical thing, right? That's, another one. It just reminded me, one of these things that this person was telling me they got from the Akashic record is that whatever was happening in the pyramids with energy wasn't physical. There are literally melted stone staircases. Non-physical things do not melt stone, and that's just another example I want to give you of if you come up with an idea intuitively, you have to have the objectivity to look and see, is there anything that proves this not to be true? And with this person, even if you prove that it's not true, anyone that's experienced ego inflation will cling to the idea, even if it's totally demonstrably false. But as above, so below, right? So matter's light in a standing wave. Light is matter in flux. So Keter's in Malkut, Malkut is in Keter. That person knew what's up. You know what I mean? And the logos gave rise to the light, right? The vibrating wave, the word, the vibration, gave rise to the light, which became matter in the universe. That's what these things are parables for. But as above, so below has, all sorts of crazy correlations. But one of the ones that I think is the most powerful is that if you shrink down to the point where you are the same size relative to the nucleus of an atom as you are right now compared to the Earth, there will be about the same distance from you to the nearest proton as there is now from you to the moon. Because the all is in the all. It is all like a hologram. And again, Keter's in Malkut, Malkut is in Keter. But after another fashion, right? It's not like it's holographic to the point where everything is exactly the same, but they are permutations and reflections of one thing. And that kind of knowledge can be experientially verified. And this, my friends, is real spirituality. This is real metaphysics. This is the process. This is how you do it, And so again, if you skip parts of the process, if you do not develop yourself according to the necessity that's dictated by the conditions of growth, you will create a void that will be filled with ego. And what goes up must come down, So really, though, before all of this other crazy, lofty stuff, you have to develop self-knowledge first and foremost. You have to be able to look your shadow dead in the eyes. You have to have the guts to integrate, You have to have the courage to admit that you do not know in order to find out. If you fill a glass with water and then you try to pour water in it, it just spills everywhere, right? So it's absolutely essential that you develop the self-knowledge and, go through the analytical processes and the self-discovery processes and the internal navigation before you even worry about all of this reading the Akashic record and, piercing the veil and all of that. What you need to do is ascertain what your true will is, the deepest part of your spiritual self, and figure out how to constrain the conditions in your life to support that function. That's it. That's the philosophum bonum. That is the heart of the matter, the crux of the apostrophe, the fat lady's serenade at the end of the apocalypse. That is it. And that is all. You must navigate your own internal universe before you set your sights on conquering the king's domain, the external world. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, or via one of the options in the chat, because otherwise Illuminostic will go broke and he won't be able to make live streams for you anymore. So, by the way, also you guys, at TripTracks1111 is my music channel, and I've just started posting on there. I know the production quality is not great, but I think some of the playing so far is good. I'm going to do reaction videos on there of like, Tool, but it's a different style of reaction video where I'm choosing material that I actually know really well, where the structure is based on significant numerology or geometry. I might know secrets, initiated knowledge about, secret meanings in the lyrics, and I'll share all of that. So Trip Tracks 1111. Also, I'll be putting guitar lessons and transcriptions on there. So don't miss that. Trip Tracks 1111 music channel. And, I do consultations. I teach guitar lessons. So if you're interested in getting some help engineering a flow state lifestyle for yourself and escaping the matrix and, becoming a spiritual gangster, and you're not afraid to do a third eye pry, and actually confront the universe on its own terms, I can help you do that for sure. So, again, thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next light stream.